Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about the latest episode of His Dark Materials. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, obviously, we pick up with Lyra having been kidnapped by the Gobblers, which it does seem like that wasn't a purposeful thing. I guess they just saw a kid wandering around, and it's like, oh, here's an opportunity to grab up another kid. So I guess Coulter didn't really have an opportunity to kind of put that order in, so it didn't seem like that. I mean, because I feel like, well, to be fair, those Gobblers ended up getting taken by the Egyptians later on, because how serendipitous for her that she ends up being rescued by like Benjamin and Tony, who are kind of went off road doing their own thing. But to be fair, it kind of lucked out. That everything kind of worked out like that. I mean, they weren't supposed to be doing that, but they did it regardless. And it's interesting because obviously, Lyra is staying with Tony and his mom. What's interesting, though, it seems like Lyra has some kind of connection to the Egyptians, because John and the other dude, they know exactly who she is. And she's like, oh, is it because you know my dad, Azrael? And it's like, wait, you know he's your dad? Okay, but it's like, yeah, your dad's always been good to us, because the fact is he respects our ways. And I guess because, once again, the Egyptians are kind of looked down upon. But I guess like Azrael never looked at them like that. So it's like he's always respected our ways, but it's more than just that. You're special. It's like, okay, so we have people constantly talking about how special she is, So, but the question is, what makes her special? Why is she so special? And that's the big question of the episode. And I thought that was just kind of fascinating how that slowly kind of unveiled everything. Like, there was this interesting, well, really quickly before I kind of go into, well, no, I'll go ahead and talk about it. I thought the whole parallel that dude was talking to Lyra about, like, the fact is, there's like, oh, what is it that Pan's gonna, stay on? Like, what's the true form that Pan's eventually going to take? And Pan was saying like, oh, I'll probably stay a mole or whatever. And I thought that was kind of an interesting situation, especially because obviously the whole thing is, once you reach kind of like pseudo adulthood, it's more so like once you reach that certain age of kind of like you become a young adult, you're kind of reached adulthood, that's when your demon takes on that form and stays in that one specific form. But for Lyra, it's like, I don't want Pan to ever be confined to one form. I want him to be able to stay like this forever. But it was interesting because it's like your demon is a representation of who you are. So whatever form your demon finally takes on, it's kind of like that's who you are in your true essence, which is interesting because the fact is that Pan's just constantly shifting all the time. Is obviously a reflection of the fact is Lyra she's growing. She's still a little girl trying to figure herself out. And I thought that's such an interesting thing. Like, maybe they kind of represented that before, but I feel like this is the first time they've made that perfectly clear, like the correlation between that, like why demons start off shifting and then eventually choose one particular form, because it's supposed to be reflective of the human. I guess it's almost like also solidifying the connection between a demon, and the connection is already strong, but I think when a demon has found its full form and you've kind of reached kind of quote unquote adulthood, I think that bond becomes completely in sync to a certain extent. So I just thought that was kind of fascinating to kind of think about that. But anyway, I am curious how the Magisterium did get word that she was potentially with the Egyptians. I mean, I guess it's like maybe they've got spies everywhere type of thing, or maybe people report stuff to the Magisterium because it's like, well, they are the high authority in this world. So I guess it's like if they're kind of throwing out there like, oh, we're looking for this little girl, have you seen her? Some people are probably more likely, oh yeah, I've seen that girl, she was with the Egyptians or whatever. I mean, also the way the Egyptians are viewed, it might be a thing of like, oh, someone might be raising their hand, be like, oh, I'm quick to tell on Egyptians, I'm ready to tell on them type of thing, so. It's just we never found out how. I mean, not unless there's someone on the inside, but it don't seem like there is, because the Egyptians are a very tight-knit community. It doesn't seem like stuff gets out on purpose. But then again, it could be a thing of someone let it out where Lyra was because they want to get Lyra. Because it's like, obviously the Egyptians want to rescue their own children, but Lyra's problematic being there, because it's like, we're going to be doing our own thing trying to retrieve our children, sure, but Lyra being here is just going to draw even more attention on us already than there already is. Even that one dude suggesting, the fact is it wasn't just Egyptian children that were taken, it was regular children too, so leave it to like the Magisterium and them to kind of find the kids. Well, not necessarily the Magisterium, but regular folk, because I'm about to say, I was like, right, because the Magisterium is literally behind this, but it seems like it's something that Miss Coulter, like it seems like it's not the Magisterium signed off on, but Miss Coulter, and not just her, it seems like Boreal, or both of them are working together to keep this super hush hush. Hence why they killed that journalist last episode. So it begs the question, like, what is it? Whatever it is, they've kind of got their side thing. Either like the Magisterium shut them down, but they're still going to keep doing what they're doing for whatever it is that they're doing up north. At the very least, she's doing up north, but I guess he has some part, and I guess he's kind of like her partner in crime with all of this, I guess. I think it's also very interesting that Lyra was in the point where she wasn't sure if she could trust the Egyptians, because for her it's like, well, she literally spent so much time with Miss Coulter. Well, to be fair, she's had betrayal after betrayal after betrayal, because it's like, well, for one, you found out the master was trying to hurt your uncle, and then it's like, okay, but I guess all that's kind of being let slide, and now it's like, oh, your uncle left you behind, and then you get with Miss Coulter, which Miss Coulter turns out to be behind the gobblers, and she also reveals the fact that your uncle's been lying to your entire life. He's actually your dad, which we find out an even bigger twist, because Mom Custer ends up kind of dropping the bomb and being like, the fact of the matter is she's her mom, which I kind of figured as much. I was like, maybe I'm wrong about that. I was like, maybe Miss Coulter isn't her mom, but turns out she totally is. Turns out, in fact, Azrael and her had an affair, because Miss Coulter was married beforehand to a dude named Edward. Things didn't end well, especially because it's like, oh, she's pregnant, but Lyra looked so much like Azrael that it was clear that an affair happened. So it turns into a situation of the Egyptians were hiding Lyra. In particular, it was Mom Custer who was hiding her. And then, Azrael, trying to defend his home, killed Edward, but Edward was still in his right to defend. And the laws it's a very gray area law, because it's like, yeah, Azrael was protecting his home that was broken into by Edward, but at the same time, it's like he was also defending his wife's honor. She'd been quote unquote defiled, and because of that whole complicated thing of like the man you were in love with caught in this complicated thing, your husband dead, like it's a very scandalous situation. You lost your daughter in the process. Basically, it seems like Miss Coulter ended up the way she is now, kind of a little mad and crazy because of the circumstances that would drive any person mad and crazy. But it turns out during the flood, Azrael took her and brought her to Jordan College so that she'd have sanctuary. So I just thought that was just interesting to learn that their story is like that. But the thing that should have clicked in my head, because the fact is, like I said, what hit me was like her tears made me think like, oh, was she trying to have like a mother-daughter relationship with Lyra? But it was like, no, those were genuine tears, because it's like, I don't want you to hate me. But also the way she speaks about Azrael, he's like, no man, he's no father, he's no man at all. Like that sounded super personal. And especially, so it's like kind of I guess that's another reason why too, because it's like, despite everything, it's like, basically Mrs. Coulter's life imploded because of Azrael, which at one point in time they were in love, and I think that love kind of turned to hatred. And maybe that's what Miss Coulter wants. She wants, obviously, to be reunited with Lyra, but Lyra is also special, but maybe on some level too, it is a means of getting back at Azrael, which now that kind of makes sense why the master left Lyra in her care, because it's like, well, of course she'd be safe with her mom, but then even the master is like, the fact is you lost her and everything, which shows you how far Miss Coulter is willing to go. She's starting to like have her people wreck the college, which even the magisterium was talking to Boreal about, like, she cannot legally do that because they basically have immunity/sanctuary, so the magisterium can't really go interfering, so she had no jurisdiction there. But just because she's pissed and she's looking for Lyra, and especially when she finds out that the automator is with Lyra, that she has one, and it's like, oh, it's the whole thing of like, he for so long he was trying to protect her. The master looked after her for like those 12 years, and it's like, I gave her to you, and what did you do? You lost her. So I guess for him, it's like, whatever path Lyra ends up on, obviously, it's better if it's away from you, considering how everything's potentially played out. So we even see at one moment, like, her demon closes the door as she was ripping the room apart, because it was just like, I had her here, and now she's gone. I don't know where she is. I don't know if I'll get her back. Like I said, it's just, I think there's this obsessive nature in her that, I mean, she probably, who knows, like, this might have been her first time ever laying eyes on Lyra when they met in Jordan College. So it might be kind of a thing of like, I was so close, and it was just, I was almost there. I was reunited with my daughter, but she doesn't even know I'm her mother, which now she does. But that doesn't, and that makes things even harder for Lyra, because it's like, wait, so that means my mom is the one going around kidnapping all of these children. The fact is, what she did to Lyra last episode, her and her monkey hurting Pan, which was hurting her. It's like, you're hurting me. This isn't the type of person you are. And for her to kind of snap like that, you know, kind of try to put you in your place and stuff like that. I guess it makes sense in a sense that because she probably hasn't had much time being a mother, just because, you know, after everything, it's like she hasn't had much practice with it and stuff like that. So it's just like, you know, when it came to the discipline, it was more so about kind of, it's my way or the highway type of mentality. So I think that's why she was immediately kind of apologetic afterwards, especially when, you know, the Azrael news got dropped. That's a lot to kind of get thrown on your plate as a kid. It's just like one thing after another. It's like, oh, you found out like Azrael's your dad. Oh, you find out Miss Coulter's your mom. It's like, that's enough to kind of shock any system, you know? And then you have Benjamin and Tony going off, sneaking into her place. I was like, oh, the poor bastards. Because we heard her rattling. I was like, Lyra didn't inform them about Coulter's demon. The fact is that it likes to sneak around an event, and it catches them. Coulter coming out with a gun. Because it's just a little interesting little thing, too, to see that there's guns here and stuff like that. It's kind of like I said, the comparison I keep making is like Full Metal Alchemist. Like, obviously, the technology is different because they're in different phases. Like I said, this is probably like, I'd say borderline early 1900s level. It's kind of what it seems, but maybe it's because obviously it doesn't have like the modern tech of like the present day world that Boreal ends up crossing over to, which we'll kind of get to that, you know, later. But it was just kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting her to have a pure gun shooting Benjamin, even threatening like, oh, I can make this go slow. I thought it was kind of interesting too. Like when she was on top of Benjamin, she was very animalistic. Like she almost acted like the monkey in that regard. So I was like, what's up with that? Like, I guess, like, because obviously there's something between her and her demon. Once again, they can be separated. Like, they don't need to be near each other. Like, there's something there, because that's not a typical person and demon relationship. So it's like, what is that? And like I said, in that moment, she was slapping his back and almost acting like a monkey. And I was like, what is up with that? Like, is she... I mean, because you would think she is human, but whatever her situation is with her demon, because at points it seems like her demon almost acted more human than her, because like her demon, like when Benjamin ended up killing himself because like, I'd rather die than betray my family, but when his demon was disappearing, her demon was grabbing at like the particles in the air, like it was reaching, like almost like it was sad. Like there were moments where it just seems like, I don't know, it seems like it's driven by her instincts. But is it something where her demon isn't something that's naturally born? Did she make it? Is it actually a reflection of herself? But to kind of put people at ease, she just makes it look like it. I don't know what to make of that. That's just fascinating, you know, to me. And then there's also the fact is that Lyra learns how to use the altimeter it seemed like I guess once she's cleared her mind needs to kind of be blank, and I guess in that moment she was just like last episode she was just thinking about stuff, and it was just like she just had so much flowing through her head that she just probably wanted to forget it all, so she tried to blank out her mind, and that's what made it move a little bit. It's actually interesting because now we actually kind of understand how it works a little bit. Basically, you ask it a question, you move the 3 dials to specific pictures while asking your question, and then it will move and point to the one thing that is potential answer. But what's interesting though is all those symbols, because obviously we know that the master, because Miss Coulter had found the books that help read the altimeter, so it takes years, and there's no way to know how to properly read it, because all of those symbols can mean different things. Like they can all have different meanings and interpretation, so it's not so clear cut. It's not something you can randomly figure out on your own, but Lyra was able to, and even distinctly find out that Benjamin was dead before the news got to them. So it's like, how did she manage to do that? That's pretty impressive. And it seems like that's a super not common thing, because because even like the home dude had brought it to John's attention. It's like, wait, she did it without the books? How's that even possible? I don't know, but she managed to do it. So saying that, you know, she might be a more important force in this coming fight, So I'm interested to see, I feel like this is just the beginning. I mean, maybe it's just telling the truth, but maybe there'll be more to it. Maybe there's even deeper power connected to it. I really like kind of understanding like those spy flies that Miss Coulter sent. Apparently they're super illegal, and if the Magisterium found out that Miss Coulter was doing that, like even in her position, if we say something as outlaw, you're not supposed to do it. And even Burial is like, are you out of your damn mind? Because for her, it's showing that she's willing to go to whatever extent. And even like, despite, whether you could look at it out of love or hate, Mom Coulter was kind of like, you can look at this as a symbol of your mom's love, because the fact of the matter is it shows, her desperation. Well, love or hate, but her desperation to find you. So, I'm sure that's not 100% that unnerving, but, still. And since I brought him up earlier, there is a whole Burial situation this episode where he crosses over again. I wonder how familiar with this world he is, because he goes to his car, because his car's been parked at the same spot for so long. So there's a little, I don't know what you call those, the little yellow things that make it so that you're not able to drive off. He was kicking it, almost being like, what is this? So like, he's still not well versed in this world, and well versed enough, I guess, with the contacts that they've made, which also feeds into it more and more of like, they're definitely not doing this, because the guy was like, so you're doing this because of your boss's orders? So like, no, you're doing this on your own. So even the Magisterium doesn't know that he's crossing over into this other world. Do they even know about the windows? I mean, you would think they would, but maybe they don't know the specific locations. Maybe he's the only one. Makes you wonder, has he even told Miss Coulter about the location of the windows? Like, at least the one in particular that he keeps slipping in and out of. But it turns out he's looking for this guy the guy he was looking for before is now someone named John Perry, but this dude died like 13 years ago. Which, side note, I could be mistaken, just looking at that picture, isn't that the actor who played, I'm blanking on his name, it's something like, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure that's the actor who played Moriarty in Sherlock, but more recently he played the hot priest in season 2 of Fleabag. I want to say that's him, which is interesting timing, because obviously, the most recent episode of the TV show Evil, they made a reference to Fleabag, and the particular reference they were making reference to was the relationship between Fleabag and Hot Priest, which is, kind of brings this all together. I think that's the same actor. I could be mistaken. The picture looked like, I was like, that looks like it's him, but I could have been mistaken. But like the dude that Boreal was talking to was kind of like, what if he wasn't from your world, came to ours? What if he's actually from this world and went to yours? But then Boreal was like, then how does he have a demon? So it begs a question like, you have to be born in that world to have a demon, or maybe there is a little more complexity to this, I guess because Home Dude kind of, wants to kind of potentially have a demon of his own, so maybe he's like, maybe it's not so clear cut and dry. But what's so interesting is Boreal was like, the fact of the matter is, you've studied our world for a while, you've studied this whole thing. Why at no point did you not chase after me to try and come to our world? It's because you're driven by fear. You're controlled by it. He's like, I understand. I was in the same situation, but I took control of my fear, and basically now he steps back and forth between the worlds and stuff like that. So I'm curious to see if anything happens with Home Dude deciding like, no, I'm a, you said I was afraid, but I'm gonna put my fear aside and I'm gonna do it. But still, so that is interesting, because Boreal does find out that the dude, like I said, his name's John Perry. Well, at least here it's John Perry. He has a wife who's sick, but he also has a child, which he's sending someone to kind of keep an eye on them with all of that. So to try and see, I guess, if John tries to make contact, or if they have some idea of where he is. So that's definitely interesting. I also thought it was kind of an interesting situation with the Egyptians, where it's like different people had different views of like, not everyone was all keen on basically going to war with the gobblers, because like I said, there was that dude who was kind of like, it might be more trouble than it's really worth. The fact of the matter is, I'm sorry that all these other kids were taken, but the fact is, we'll be sacrificing ourselves and so much more if we decide to go in. But Lyra kind of points out the fact of the matter is, Miss Coulter needs to be stopped, because if we don't stop her, she's just going to take more and more children. And it's so interesting because and I think that's an element of this story we'll kind of see, is the fact is, it almost seems like Lyra jumps from one person to the next, because it's like, She went from the college to Miss Coulter to now the Egyptians. It's almost like, and I think maybe that kind of feeds into like her a little bit of like she doesn't settle down in one place. Obviously, circumstances keep leading her to different groups, but it seems so interesting because it's almost like they're setting her up in the sense because she's a kid, she doesn't really fully know where she belongs and where she stands in the grand scheme of things. So every new place in her life, she latches onto. She latched onto the college. She latched onto Miss Coulter. She's latching onto the Egyptians now. Maybe that's me just reading too much into it, but I just think that's kind of fascinating me as you kind of, think about it in the grand scheme of things. So obviously by the end, Miss Coulter does know where Lyra is. It was actually kind of sad seeing her kind of get all drunk and everything, seeing how devastated she was over it. It's not just her desperation, but even just how devastated, because she was just walking on the edge and just kind of drinking a lot, which is like, oh, that seems like a very, woman who's lost something very important to her, feeling vibe to it. So you can feel like, once again, that desperation, that longing that she has to be reunited with Lyra. I think is kind of interesting. And another thing that does have to be kept in mind is what the master said about a betrayal. It would be on Lyra's part. Now the question is, we're setting it up, is it going to be a thing of she ends up betraying the Egyptians? Could it be her betraying her mother? Because it might be a thing of like, oh, you choosing your dad's side rather than me. That might be the type of situation they might be going for with this whole thing. Of like, maybe that's the great betrayal that Lyra performs that she immediately regrets. It kind of makes me think of kind of like, it's a deep cut reference that I don't know if anyone's going to get. The Tower of God. It kind of reminds me of how season 1 ends. That's all I'll say. Season 1 of Tower of God, if you've ever seen that or read that, regardless, it may be kind of something similar to that. It might be something where Lyra ends up choosing the wrong side type of thing. But, ultimately, we'll see as the Egyptians have kind of gathered up their forces and they are all heading north to figure out what it is, that device that was being built that Lyra saw blueprints for, what that's about, what the kids are being used for. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all that ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good